Call to order, City of Keystone Heights Budget Workshop, Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. It's 3 p.m. Will you call roll, Ms. Rakowski?
Mayor Lake,
Here?
Vice Mayor Hart,
Here.
Councilman Bobby Brown,
Here.
Councilman Tony Brown,
Here.
Councilwoman Kelly.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Mayor, and this is a workshop, so there will be no motions made, just reviewing the budget and recommendations.
Yes. Are there any public comment cards?
I have none.
Okay, then we'll go to item 1 on the agenda, 2021-2022 fiscal year budget review. I'm going to let Ms. Rakowski start us off.
Yes, Madam Mayor, so you have two different packets. You have one that is the budget packet, the proposed budget packet, minus the cemetery budget, as we're still working through that with our brand new addition to the cemetery, our columbarium and ossuariums. So we'll be seeing that within the next couple of days. We've got processes, procedures, and fees set place. I'll go over those with you individually over the next 2 weeks as we meet, and then we'll bring that back to council on the 13th, as well as policies. But it's kind of a difficult thing to budget without having a good price point, or at least a ballpark of where those niches are going to sell at. So with that being said, all the asks that we have received are the same except for Ms. Barbara Franklin. She withdrew her original Halloween application and submitted a new one for October 30th, which is that Saturday as opposed to Sunday. And she is proposing that we do, or she's asking that she closes down State Road 21 from Lakeview down to State Road 100, as they've done in previous years. Her request at the time, or at this time, is up to $1,500 to cover the safety and security the deputies required to close that road, and then she's also asking for an additional $500 to cover the band. I believe that it was the recommendation of the Budget and Finance meeting at last week's workshop to not go to the $500, but ask for more information, or if there's going to be a partnership in there, but not to fund the full 500. And then that'll have additional conversations today within our agency budget. With that being said, we're kind of work at both packets at the same time, and I apologize to Mayor Lake and Councilman Tony Brown, as this is almost a duplicate of last week's meeting for the purposes of council. But we'll start with the Lakes budget. We have coming in $10,000 from the general fund that we did not bring in this first fiscal year due to loss of taxes because of COVID. So we've put that back in. We've got interest. We're looking at income coming in about $10,100. We've upped our lake maintenance to $6,000, and so that will bring our lake fund to $45,000 next year. Budget and Finance was briefed that we were at $39,000. That has changed to $35,000 because we did have to add on to our swim area, and then the additional spraying from Mr. Fitz.
Which I think is money well spent. If you look at the lake today, it looks much better than it has in years past. I know I get compliments almost on a daily basis that the lake is looking much better. So any questions of staff on the lakes budget? Nope. Okay, Mrs. Rakowski, you want to move on?
All right. Next, we're going to move to our infrastructure budget, and then in your packet, we will be discussing the shear construction Exhibit B,
Which is in the last packet.
which is should be in the top packet, but it's the last stapled packet.
This one. No, here, go to this one right here.
Okay.
Everybody got the shear construction? There you go.
And I do apologize, there is really no clean way to go through these. It's definitely a pen and paper meeting.
Okay,
So our state income that we're expected to bring in is $164,000. We do have some interest coming in for our CDs and our accounts, bringing it at about $165,000 total for next year. In speaking with GMRP, our current engineer, we're looking at about a $75,000 scope and fee for the planning of a right-of-way maintenance. Now that right-of-way maintenance includes the roadway, sidewalks, the additional sidewalks, parking, traffic study, traffic patterns, drainage, and the possibility of stormwater management. So it's in all, anything that's going to happen within our right-of-way, it should be included in this plan.
Okay,
And then we have we have the $7,500 that we take out every year for sidewalk maintenance. Mayor Lake, I do have a working list that I'll be emailing out to council on what the rest of what we're gonna be spending for this year is. Leaving our projects at $82,500. On the bottom, you'll see a list of CDs and when they mature. And then, with that being said, it was the recommendation of Budget and Finance at last week's meeting to cash in CD 0266 in the amount of $61,000, which has already matured, and bring that into our revenue stream. With that being said, we have a total in the bank right now in our checking account for infrastructure of roughly about $173,000, plus our additional $165,000 that we're looking to bring in next year, cashing in a $61,000 CD, and that will cover the costs for the recommendations of Budget and Finance to go ahead and move forward with both restrooms. The restroom building, which is the rehab of the current facility that's down there with the 2 restrooms in the amount of roughly $87,000. And then the addition of the restroom to the pavilion in the amount of about $170,000. And so our 2 projects under CIP next year will be the restrooms and then cashing in the CD in the amount of $61,000 with a scope and fee for our entire right-of-way for the next 5 years.
so are there any questions of staff or members of the Budget and Finance Committee?
If you were to roll a CD over, what interest rate would you expect to get?
Ms. Barbie is getting back to me with that. It's minimal.
It would be less than inflation.
Yes.
So to spend the money now, where the cost might be more, most likely would be more, say, a year or 2 from now, just makes good fiscal sense.
Yeah. Bringing that CD out and bringing it into our fund is I believe a good practice. Will be investing into infrastructure, things that can be utilized for years to come.
We just didn't want to leave the account empty,
Right.
Right.
in case there were any cost overruns or anything that we might not have
Unanticipated costs or something happens in the future.
foreseen. So, any other discussion about the scope of project from Shear?
The only question that I have, and I guess Shear wouldn't be involved in this, would be where is the allocation for engineering work for the water issues that we have, the drainage issues?
For our drainage issues, so that would be inclusive in our right-of-way improvements plan.
That's in the right of way, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Brown, Ms. Keller, any questions? So did we do our homework okay? You guys are in agreement with how we want to spend the CIP money? Yes, okay.
So with that being said, the picnic area and then the stage will work with outside, grants and outside revenue sources for years to come.
Okay, so any questions of staff? All right, so we'll move on to CRA.
Absolutely. CRA we're looking at $27,000 of the city's portion into the agency's fund at the 4.2901. The county's portion is going to be roughly around $60,000, give or take, depending on where their millage passes. We're looking at about $110,000 that we're carrying forward in the bank as we close out this fiscal year. Interest and other revenue sources, we're looking at right around $197,000 is our income. Going down to expenses, we've stepped up our advertising budget substantially as we start moving into showcasing or featuring our downtown area to $10,000. Our insurance and liability, that remains the same at $4,900. Membership dues in all of the cost of doing business is there. That's the same every year. We just have that in there in case we need it out of the agency's fund. Going down to our audit, it's a standard $1,800 out of CRA. The Clay County EDC is asking for $2,000. This is a continuous contribution that we have. They do support our airport and other businesses in the area, in the surrounding area. We have $5,000 that gets allocated to legal fees. That goes into the general fund. A $1,000 request from the Small Business Development Council, that's the SBDC. They've come and spoke to us, and we have an annual contribution of $1,000. Mr. Chris Abbott's with the SBDC, supports several local businesses within our city limits. Contracted services goes to $9,800. I've put in there the request for the 5K, which is the allocation of up to $1,500 for safety and security. $5,000 for other events that the cities could potentially put on for additional safety and security as we move throughout this year. Outside events services, this is a combination of the runs, I'm sorry, not the runs. This is a combination of the parades and then any other additional safety and security.
The OCD?
The OCD, yes. All of their safety and security needs, and then we have the additional $7,500 for our fireworks. The seasonal decorations, this is continuing efforts from our Christmas. We did allocate $15,000, and I promise you we spent every last dime of it for banners and lighting, wreaths and whatnot to go on all of our poles. And so we'll continue that this coming year, keep adding to it until we have a nice decorations for the downtown area. Any conversations or questions about allocations of those funds? Now, understanding that these are the $1,500 asks are up to $1,500. We received that number from the sheriff's office, and if they were to be able to fully staff a parade or a run or a road closure, that it would cost us right about $1,500. But that's all reimbursement and goes straight to safety and security only, unless the agency decides to direct me otherwise. Moving on, we talked about the facade grant, and so we allocated $50,000, and then we will do as much as we can as far as what that grant's going to look like, matching purposes for the outside areas of our downtown businesses.
So is staff going to be contacting downtown property owners?
As soon as that grant is approved by the agency,
Okay.
and then we'll do open enrollment. But it'll probably take, I mean, just for full disclosure, it'll take at least 2 meetings from the agency's part to review the grants and then the timelines and how we want to do this.
Okay.
And then once that's open, we will do probably a walk to make sure that everybody is aware that this is,
Okay.
they have this opportunity.
Okay.
$10,000 allocated for benches and trash cans. It sounds like a lot, but you won't get a whole lot done, but it'll be a good start in what happens at the beach and behind City Hall. Our plan is to utilize those very hot black benches behind City Hall and then maybe down at the park, the beach, put them in the shade, and then put something that's a little bit more heat friendly in our downtown area. Moving on, we have nothing at this time allocated to rails to trails. The conversation of council and the agency was to close out some of the existing projects, focus on the beach, and then we'll circle back to complete the rails to trails, or the trailhead. We have the $500 that has been asked to be allocated to the Welcome Center on an annual basis to support any paper pamphlets or any additional needs that they may have. And then we have a streetscape plan of $78,150. That's the remainder of our budget. Just quick conversation for council's visibility or the agency's visibility. In talking with DMRP, walking the downtown for a landscape plan and turning our downtown area into more of a walkable plaza, the scope and fee for design is going to be right about that $70,000 mark. So we will be looking at FDOT and other funding sources to implement that plan, but it was a little bit of a sticker shock, and I want to make sure that you're aware as well, and they'll be here to present that scope and fee. But wanted to make you aware that we're looking at right about $70,000 for a plan for the downtown area.
Last year, didn't we allocate an additional $40,000 out of the general fund? Do I remember that correctly? in addition to what we had in the CRA. Did we have 40,000 identified in the general fund?
Excuse me, we can do that again, bring it out of what would be considered reserves because it was not spent this year, and then just carry that forward. It was not budgeted in this year's budget, but we can pull that out of reserves essentially. In general fund, we do a balanced budget based on what our revenue is going to be for that specific year. But we've done it in years past, we've carried money out of that and brought it forward.
And the reason I bring that up is because, you know, if you spend $75,000 planning and designing, you at least want to see something for that amount of investment. And 40,000 won't go very far in terms of what the ultimate plan will be, but at least it would seed it.
My recommendation on that, if I may, Madam Mayor, would be to keep the budget as is, and then we can do a budget amendment if we see the opportunity to spend that money. I don't want to put it into the budget and have I don't want to say hassle, but have it to where it's carrying forward and then we don't necessarily need it because maybe we found revenue sources outside of our general fund.
That's fine, I just bring it up because.
Absolutely, but that's a fantastic point and a good opportunity for funding that project as we move forward. And we
So
can have that conversation if
I
needed.
think you're suggesting that the $40,000 not sunset and informally be carried over as needed. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, if she's suggesting that we might have outside funding sources through DOT, I understand why she doesn't want to make it a line item, and we do a budget amendment later down the road after the design plans are completed. And I'm okay with that, but I just remembered we had set aside not only the CRA money, but we had a line item in the general fund to identify money that we could spend on the landscaping itself.
So that money has not gone elsewhere, it'll just be put away into our, I don't want to say rainy day fund, but into our reserves.
Okay,
So.
that's cool, as long as it's somewhere out there in virtual bank land.
So with that being said, the only real conversation, and then Madam Mayor and Councilman Brown, if you want to have the conversation based on the $500 ask for the band.
So we did discuss it last week or whenever we met, and we felt like, number one, if the city funds things like the band or the candy, then it really is not an outside group doing an event, it really is the city doing the event. And we really want to keep the CRA pretty clean because everything we spend out of the CRA should benefit downtown businesses in some way, shape, or form. And the time of the event doesn't necessarily benefit businesses unless they choose to stay open late. So, Mr. Brown, did you agree with that?
I agree with that.
We just want to keep it clean. And safety and security, we certainly feel responsible for because it is our downtown. But in terms of funding specific items like bands and candy and things like that, we think that belongs to people who are kind of skin in the game.
And that doesn't benefit the entire community, whereas law enforcement does. This would be a specific benefit to a specific group of people. I'm not real familiar with this band, but I know that they probably have a limited draw, let's put it that way.
So unless anybody else sees a.
Can you pull down your microphone, please?
I understand there's been something in Clay County they have canceled. Have you heard about that?
Yes, so there was 2 events that already been canceled in Clay County for Halloween type events.
So that's going to draw more people, I feel. A lot of people will go to Gainesville, a lot of people will do it Sunday, but it's going to bring more people into Keystone. There's already on the candy, the Keystone Business Association and the businesses. I don't have a business, but I'm even going to be donating money toward the candy. I think every effort's being made to keep the cost down, but your band, I believe, is very important. The better they are, there's still talk about some bands at events that I've been to. I believe that would draw. It might not be, businesses might not be open at that time, but people look around and they'll be back to our city, especially the pavilion and closing off the roads is a good idea for safety. A lot of children run around, but I think the additional 500 for the band would be well spent. That's my take on it.
CRA, we can spend money for special events, and of course, that doesn't restrict us to not music. But I want to pick your brain, Lynn. I don't recall the city ever paying for a band other than for a city event. I think probably the Clay County band we helped subsidize a few years ago for the mayor's ball, but have we ever paid for a band? I just don't remember.
No, we have not, and then it's been conversations through the agency and council that might not be the best use of the dollars that we receive for taxpayers. One of the conversations that I've had with council in the past couple of months is that as the city looks at the potential of putting on more events, for an example, right now we're working on what the structure would be for a monthly market of sorts. These events will be self-sustaining, so we would not be utilizing tax dollars. We would be offsetting the cost of events by what we bring in from the event, so that way all of our tax revenue is going towards the betterment of the community versus paying for entertainment.
Well, I feel that the band would be, I mean, if you don't have a band, what's it going to be like for the city putting it on next year? You know, you're eventually going to have to pay for some kind of entertainment for the adults. The children are going to be supervised by the adults. And I remember the last one that I helped with the haunted house, there was a band up here behind the library. I still remember the dancing dinosaurs. Everybody had a great time. That's just.
The other thing I'm fearful of is that once you open the door to something like paying for a band, then you can't deny anybody else who comes to council in the CRA and says, well, why can't you pay for this? So I think we open the door to a lot more requests that aren't suitable for CRA funding, using tax dollars to pay for things that we don't need to be paying for. And honestly, from a state level, I would say that if we were ever audited and they came in and they looked at what we were paying for in terms of bands and candy and things like that, they would look at our CRA and they may shut us down because we're using the money in ways which it was not intended to be used.
Now, to clarify, if this were a city event, which this is not, we're just basically renting the space for free. If this were a city event, then the CRA money could be used for entertainment. Is that a correct statement as far as you know?
It could potentially, and you're kind of, I don't want to say cutting hairs on that, but what I proposed to the agency and to council in meetings past is that our events are self-sustained, and so as we move forward with something of an annual or a monthly market or things of that nature, we'll be collecting booth fees. That will go into an item of that would be events. So we wouldn't be using tax dollars for events. We wouldn't be using the additional taxes that businesses pay within the agency. We wouldn't be using the ad valorem taxes. We would be utilizing events, that specific line item in events. So it would be a revenue source if we bring in $6,000 for the year. And I'm just throwing out numbers. This wasn't a conversation that I was prepared to have on paper, but if we bring in $6,000 annually on booth fees and things like that, then we could utilize $6,000 back into our events, whether it be candy, whether it be a haunted house, whether it be bounce houses or things of that nature.
I know, being a musician and being in a few bands over the years, that a lot of times we would just simply donate our time or
Yes.
work at a reduced rate. $500 for, I think it's a 5-piece band, isn't it? That's about $100 per player. They're probably going to be playing, what, 4 or 5 sets? I don't know. I'm not suggesting they're being overpaid, but they're not being underpaid. Perhaps the way to look at this would be to say the $1,500 might be a little on the skinny side and increase that to $1,750. And if they want to allocate a certain policeman to that band area, you know, that might be all right. In other words, give them a little bit more money for security.
Well, there's some bands that play now and all they just put a tip jar out.
That's right.
They don't charge you for them.
That's right.
And we're not opposed to the band. I don't want to speak on behalf of the agency. I don't know that the city's not opposed to having a band playing.
No.
It's just utilizing tax dollars to pay for that. has been the conversation. It was a couple of years ago, I believe Councilman Brown, while you were mayor, that the decision of council was to fund safety and security.
And I'll chime in. One of the, you gotta have some kind of music going on. Ever since we've had this down here for years, there's always been a band. The bands have always volunteered. So, and I strongly suggest that the money in the CRA is always, for events like this, would be for safety and security. That's our job, is the safety and security, because everybody knows how many people are going to show up.
Thousands.
And I will tell you that you will have another agency walking around checking, because there are some weird people in this world, and there's and they make sure our kids are taken care of. Put it that way. But I think with the businesses that we have, I know times are rough and tough for sure for businesses, but the business association, and I'm not going to speak ill about the business association at all, but this might be one of the yearly things that they do, and they could, I don't know what their dues are or anything like that. That might be something that they could go back to their agency to see if they can donate some money towards this band. And but I don't think it's, right now it's not our place to, we need to stick with our safety and security.
Expanding on that a little bit more, Kiwanis, of course, their thrust is doing stuff for kids, and this event really is for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if your group were to say approach Kiwanis and maybe Rotary and collect it from non-governmental sources, it might be a little bit better. But I agree with you, Tony. I can't see the public purpose here, the general public purpose, versus law enforcement, which does have a general public purpose. So that's, and being a musician, I love to get paid when I work, but I just can't see the connection here.
Yeah. So I think it's a consensus from the board that we will pass on the payment.
About how many hours does the band play?
I can't speak to that. That's up to the event coordinator.
So you don't know about how many hours?
So I know that the road
Probably
closure is
about
from
maybe
5 to 9.
My band played that 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think we charged anybody anything, and I think we played 3 sets, which would be about right. And we made, nickels and dimes as far as tips, and we did it just because we wanted to do it.
So consensus still is not in favor of the $500.
I would be for it. I'd still be for it.
Okay. Do you want to go into the general fund now?
Sure. So there's a couple of points of conversation within the asks. One is the ask from Impact Clay in the amount up to $5,000. Budget and Finance had conversations last week about splitting that in half and discussing the $2,500 contribution to Impact Clay. And then the other request is from Ms. Vivian Katz. We discussed that into the Save Our Lakes, or no, I'm sorry, not Save Our Lakes, into our Lakes Fund. With that being said, we'll review the general fund. If there's any questions, we'll go page by page. Please feel free to ask, and then we'll have conversations afterwards. The proposed taxes for this coming year at a millage rate of 4.2901 is roughly about $300,823. We're looking at gas tax, utility taxes, communication tax, combined with our property taxes of a revenue or an income of $578,823.74. Our business tax plus our permitting fees, which is probably a little bit on the low side given some of the things that we'll be handling within planning and zoning over the next couple of months, but we budgeted right at $5,000. State revenue sharing, mobile home, alcohol, and our half-cent sales tax comes in at $141,903. We're looking at the traffic violation of $100. That's something that we've been in communication with CCSO about what stops and what tickets they've made within the city limits. We do receive a very small portion of that. And then with that being said, we have our FDOT agreement and then our reimbursement for our street lights. Are there any questions on any of the revenue sources on page 1?
You know, I was looking, we were talking yesterday, Lynn, when we were discussing the sheriff coming in for our meeting last night. We were talking about the half cent millage or a half point millage increase. And I said to you, well, at 4.29, you know, how much are we bringing in ad valorem taxes? And you said, oh, about $300,000. Do you remember when we talked about law enforcement for city limits? We would have to more than quadruple our ad valorem taxes to pay for what that would have cost the
And we
city.
would have had to have security for ourselves. For raising those taxes.
It's a good thing you're hiring law enforcement.
Private security, right? Anyway, I so appreciate, you know, looking at the income levels now from a newer perspective when you realize what things cost in the real world. So we appreciate the Clay County Sheriff's Office for providing that for us.
We have a fantastic partnership with them.
Yes.
Are there any questions on page 1? All right. Moving on to page 2, we have facility rentals, some CDs, or credit card processing fees, and some of internal reimbursements that we have from different accounts. We're looking at a total revenue stream of $826,641.24. That number is very specific because of the 95% that we have to allocate from our ad valorem taxes. So before we move on to expenses, are there any questions about our income?
I know this is kind of offline, but are we going to entertain an application from the mobile gas station anytime soon? Have you heard from them?
Yes, we've been in conversations with them, brought DMRP in to have a conference call. They quickly turned in their site plan after that conversation. We put in our comments on that, gave them back, and then now we're waiting. The last communication we had with them was on the 19th.
Of September?
No.
Oh, no.
What are we in? We're in August. The 19th of August.
19th of August was the last
So
communication.
it's, we're waiting on their responses to some of the variances that they're gonna require.
So they haven't.
It's
they're not-
moving, it's just,
moving, just,
it's moving.
so do you have a future date now for P and Z in terms of the other
We
project?
received, all of the landscaping review. I do have the ordinance and drafted, and we received a landscaping review from DMRP. Those have been forwarded a couple of days ago. We're waiting for that specific developer to come back with his comments, and then we'll set a date.
Okay.
And then the next question, or the next development, is the Country Meadows. After a long period of quiet, we have had conversations. They wanted to know about landscaping, so we answered their questions. They're very general questions, but we suspect that it appears that Country Meadows is still moving forward. So I anticipate probably an application from them sometime in the future.
Okay.
Is P and Z at full staff now with 5?
Yes, I believe so. Just because of some maintenance that we anticipate moving forward with some of our parks. Next is personal services for Parks and Recreation. The of $17,000. This is how we have to, lack of a better word, I apologize, sometimes it just doesn't
Allocate?
how we have to allocate or how we have to disperse our payroll. And so
Okay.
you'll see payroll in several different areas, and it's just for budgeting purposes and how we spend our funds.
Okay.
Total Parks and Rec is $52,000. Going down to the next line is the planning fees and grant services. This is a conversation that we've had. Council will be seeing a contract with Clay County Board of County Commissioners regarding their grant writing services. They do have a fully staffed grant team. The 25,000 does include any asks from the city side as well as the additional asks that we had from the airport that we funnel their needs into our grant, into our ask with the county into our contract. Speaking with the county, the 25,000 should be more than sufficient. Unless we start seeing an abundance of grants come in, then it'll be well worth it and we can look at bringing more into that. Operating expenses, this is what we have pretty much every year for vehicle insurance, city hall supplies, maintenance, auditing, things of that nature. The only increase really is the $50,000 for city engineers. We do have a lot of projects that are coming up, and so we wanted to make sure that we had more than sufficient funds for the. So with that being said, are there any questions on page 3?
Any questions? Oh, everybody's happy. Keep going, Mr.
I like
Burkowski,
it.
you got it.
Moving along to the top of page 4 is a continuing of our operation expenses. These are specific things like our special magistrate, in our code enforcement contingency, bringing our operating expenses to $178,000. It's a big jump from what we have at the moment, but a lot of that is reallocating where these how we fund these. So the monies are still the same. It's just what line items they're coming out of. Going down to payroll services, you'll see, as directed by council, the allocation for contingencies for the councils broken up into specific seats. $2,000 allocated to seat 4. The remainder of the seats receive $1,000. Health insurance is looking at a $47,000 cost. Workers' compensation, we're staying at about $26,000. We should be doing a bulk payment here in the next couple of weeks to bring up our $13,000 that we have in there. Retirement at $11,000, and so that brings our finance and administration to a total of $454,000. That's an increase over what we have for this coming year, but again, it's just reallocating different line items.
Have you talked to Mr. Cummings lately? Can you sharpen his pencil on that number?
I'm sorry.
On 513140? Can he sharpen his pencil? Can it get a little leaner?
Oh, for our health insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. I'll bring him in. My fear is we have a contract with them that ends this coming year. So this will be the last year that we have those price points. And then we'll have to renegotiate our whole policy. That's where we'll see a potential of savings. However, at this point in time, I'm very fearful of savings of anywhere when we start opening up those
worms, those cans. Well, hopefully he's sharpening his pencil for us. We're a long time partner,
Yes.
client.
So with that being said, are there any additional questions on page 4? Moving on to page 5 with an anticipated of the full 3% cost of living increase for mayor and council. We're looking at $23,640. So everybody was seeing a slight increase based on the policy that was passed a couple years ago. Moving down, we have the cemetery. That's just a reimbursement for payroll services that we spend out in the cemetery. Our code enforcement officer, instead of breaking up hours of our current code enforcement on 2 days a week, we are funding his entire salary out of code enforcement. Again, it's always there. It's just a reallocation of how those funds are dispersed. Safety and security, we're at $10,000. We're looking into that $29,000. However, majority of that, I believe, is for the fence that was at City Hall or put around the beach. We took that out of safety and security. We had to fund that quickly in anticipation of if there was any additional CARES funding that wasn't there.
So in terms of the American Rescue Plan,
Yes.
are we looking at the continuation of the infrastructure we established through CARES up Lawrence Boulevard in terms of repeaters for the Wi-Fi zone and cameras?
Yes, so I've actually, Mr. Clark emailed me this morning with additional information that he needs as-built from FDOT on the downtown area so that he can get us a couple of different options for
Okay.
that.
So you're anticipating that will be out of
The art funding,
the art funding, okay?
yes. We have $30,000 in materials and supplies for our public works outside. We've got $10,000 in additional signage for replacing road signs, street signs, stop signs, things of that nature. Are there any questions on page 5?
And our equipment-wise, we're good for this budget year. We don't need to buy any.
We don't need to buy any large equipment, so that $30,000 will cover some of those weed eaters and things of that nature that we
Okay.
need to replace on a regular basis.
Okay.
Page 6 is just more general operating expenses. We've got utilities for public works, payroll for public works and taxes, the remainder of the payroll that isn't taken out through code enforcement, parks, or cemetery. Professional services, we have our contribution, and that's all professional services. We have our contribution to the CRA that comes out of our general fund. We've got our $10,000 for our lakes, our $1,500 for both the 2025 Centennial Celebration and our Heritage Commission.
Mr. Hart, since you're here, Vice Mayor, are you anticipating that the Centennial Celebration is a real deal? Should we continue to carry this money?
That's not necessarily allocated to the heritage or to the centennial, but yeah, I think so. And it is a real deal. In fact, I'm going to be scheduling a meeting and I have to talk to you. One of the members of the corporation that we've formed doesn't like indoor meetings right now, so we may end up having a picnic or something. But yes, I would say keep it in there. The Heritage Commission has rarely spent anywhere close to its budget, but I think it probably will as the date approaches. Yeah.
Okay.
And this does not roll over.
That's correct.
It refreshes every year.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on page 6 for staff? Nope. Okay, we move on to page 7.
Page 7, you'll see that we have $350,000, and again, I need to rename that from CARES Act to ARP funding. That's going to come in to the general fund, and we're looking closer to about $400,000. Our allocation is just shy of $800,000 over the next 2 years, so that those funds will come into the general fund and then come right back out of the general fund and go into its own account. And we will discuss that as the rules and regulations of that tighten up just a little bit more.
I'm very excited about that funding.
So with that being said, if there are any questions regarding the general fund as presented,
The only thing I don't think we discussed was the impact clay. I know in Budget and Finance, Mr. Brown was not in favor of funding. Has your opinion changed since that date?
No, ma'am. But I would say, and my issue is that it's impact clay, and my fear is whatever we give, we don't know where that money's going. My thing is, if we're gonna use taxpayers' money, if they have a project that they can come to us that they're gonna do around here in Keystone, I don't have a problem with it. And I don't have a problem with, during the year, if they come up with something, they come to us, we can always do an amendment. I think they're a good organization, but I have this thing about giving out money and it's going to the north end and not the south end.
Yeah, if you make a line item for a group like this, I mean, in my mind, you're investing. And so when a project does make itself available, you have skin in the game and you can show that you have skin in the game. But it may not benefit us immediately, and you're right about that. We may not see that money come back to the south end of Clay County anytime soon. I know they're working on a project with Operation Barnabas, which has impacted South Clay in terms of helping veterans find homes, find housing. And that's been really important. But it's really the will of the council. I can communicate to Impact Clay that if they have a specific project, we like to be involved. if there's no real taste for it being in the budget.
I'm, a little different spin that I want to put on this is basically it has the goal, I think, it's kind of vague the way it was presented, but it's sort of an overlay group tying together a bunch of public welfare organizations, nonprofits. But would not the Kiwanis or the Rotary or the Lions also qualify? And if we were going to do it for Impact Clay, the local organizations do an awful lot of a social welfare nature, primarily
that's
for
very
kids.
true.
So where do you draw the line? I think that even though what they're doing is laudable, I don't think spending public funds, unless it's going to specifically benefit here, as Tony mentioned, I just don't think it's a good policy decision
That's fair.
to do it. Yeah.
All right, so we move on. You have anything else for us, Mr. Kukowski?
That's all I have.
That's all you have. Anything for the good of the order? I will share that I had an awesome time Friday evening presenting the city limit sign to the 2021 weightlifting team at their football game where they awarded their state rings. And so they were very excited to have their city limit sign. So it was a lot of fun to present to them. Anything else for the good of the order?
In the meeting, we're not voting on things, right?
Right.
So, this event for the Halloween Boone Boulevard is coming up, so the band money is not gonna be available, or it is, how does that work?
No, we didn't vote on it today, and there was no consensus. There was a consensus not to pay the $500.
So the budget will be drafted without that in there. There's 2 hearings. You'll be seeing a full budget only on September 13th as well as September 27th. There are 2 public hearings for the budget, and then that's when it will be adopted. And those funds will be available for next fiscal year starting October 1.
Right, so anyone wanting to speak to that item could do it during a public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on a minute, I got a bone. I was out of town, took Rebecca back to school, and when I got back Sunday night, I looked at Facebook and I saw the thing on Facebook. It gave me heartburn because we as a council are a team, and that's how I've always looked at it. It would have been nice if we all would have been invited.
Yeah,
For
that was really kind of short notice. We have been trying to get with them over a month now. The sign has been ready. We've called the coach. The coach didn't come. I didn't come one time. So it really was kind of I saw it on Facebook Thursday, emailed the principal really fast, said, is it appropriate to do it at your game? And she said yes. So it was within 24 hours. Normally I would say absolutely we could do it at a meeting, but this was kind of just an opportune time. They were getting their rings and they got it all at one time.
Well, I would, as a council person, I would prefer for now on that we do it here like we always do, and in a council meeting, or we get invited
Yeah.
or acknowledged, because this whole council supports the schools, the
Sure.
athletics. We always have. We've had a sign down there since Miss Boatwright was here, and that was
I
years
know.
ago. And so I as a council would appreciate the opportunity to be at events like that.
Sure.
So,
Thank you. I'll keep it in mind. It was
Okay.
just for the moment. Anything else? Go to the order? We're adjourned.